Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we're gonna be doing multiple book reviews. I recently ended my Japan series, and as you can tell, I'm back in my room in my beautiful desk doing these types of videos once more. Anyway, I'm gonna be reviewing books that I have read since late December to today. So the title is a bit clickbaity, please don't hate me for that, but I really wanted to share my thoughts on these popular books and if I'd personally recommend them or not. Of course, at the end of the day, it all boils down to you if you want to purchase a book or not, or any of the stories that I'll mention on my list, or if you enjoyed it after your personal experience of reading it. Please do not get offended if I gave it a low rating. Instead, maybe you can give your opinion on why you love the book personally. Let's keep things cordial. There's no right or wrong way to critique a book, and all this opinion being expressed in this video, obviously they're all mine and have nothing to do with my personal feelings about the author or any of the people represented in the book in general. Also, please be aware that there will be spoilers ahead, so watch out for that. Let's start with a book that I really like and ended up giving the only 5 stars of this list. I finished this during the December holidays, and I'm so happy I did because it made my holidays 10 times even better. And that book is God of the Woods by Liz Moore. If you're on Goodreads, you might have noticed this book winning an award for Best Thriller of 2024. I tend to not look into awards so much because I don't want to end up being so disappointed, but God of the Woods, oh my gosh, it's really amazing and it deserves all the praise and accolades that it gets. Now, this book takes place in 1970s America. I'm not very well versed with American history. I mean, I know what I can from books and from documentaries I see in YouTube, but I think this was, from what I read, a year or a decade or so filled with presidential scandals like the Watergate scandal. The Vietnam War was ending, and basically all of America was going through some very huge economic change. Now, at the center of this story is a very huge cast of characters, primarily women. The story picks up right when a young girl disappears in the middle of camping season, and this is no ordinary young girl. She's Barbara Van Laar, the daughter of a rich family that owns and rules the land, basically. American loyalty at its finest. You know, when I was reading the story, I was wondering why so many people in New York City has a Dutch surname. Well, that's because the Dutch apparently colonized the area, as it was abundant in land, mining, and the animal trade. Apparently, they were in hunting for beavers for their fur, which is disgusting, and I do not support that at all. Now, you also might have heard of some famous Dutch surnames in American history, like the Vanderbilts, the Roosevelts, and Serena van der Woodsen. So that's an interesting fact for you all. Anyway, it's from here that we sort of learn that this isn't the first time that a member of the Van Laar family has disappeared. Many years ago, if I recall, I think it was a decade ago, the Van Laar son had disappeared under mysterious circumstances as well. But while the Van Laar family are at the center of this mystery, what really drives the heart of the story is the blue-collared workers. And I really kind of like that aspect because so many stories these days, they're always about rich people and they're always at the center of the story, rich mysterious people. I recall when I was very young, I used to read We Were Liars, and while that is a good story, I kind of like it when they talk about the people that work for them as well, and that plays into a very big factor in the book. In fact, there was a quote in the end of the book in which a character worries about the middle class family who has long owned the land for decades, and it's right into the plot, the family becomes at risk of losing the right to the land, and then that character kind of brushes it off and says they'll be fine because it's only the elite who suffer great losses when their wealth is taken away from them. Us middle-class folks, we have always had to depend on ourselves. Which, as a middle-class worker from a corrupt third world country, I can attest that is true. I have always had to depend on myself to live. I cannot depend on the government for anything. Going back, I really do think this book probably won't appeal to everyone. And I say that because it is a book with like multiple POVs and multiple timelines. I mean, we literally follow characters throughout the decades. You really need to dive into it and take the time to understand what's going on to truly appreciate the plot and the story and the book in general. So that being said, like when reading this, I totally had to soak in the timeline. I really had to understand what's going on in each scene. If you're going to skim through, you probably will get lost because every single chapter and every single page plays a significant part to the story as a whole. There are also like a number of red herrings throughout the book. I mean, I think that might be distracting to some people, but as someone who really loves true crime in general, I didn't really mind that. I think it kind of added to the authenticity of the book, right? Because not every case will be served to you like cut and dry. That's just how the world works. Of course, in my opinion, I also found it like quite easy to read because Liz Moore does indicate the name of the character and the timeline in each chapter. I'm putting that out there because many people have found it to be such a difficult read and they just dropped the book after reading the first few chapters. I don't know, I just didn't have that experience. I kind of can relate to it to the experience when I was reading Priory of the Orange Tree. Like, I put down the book so many times because I couldn't just follow the story because there was a huge cast of characters and it was so confusing, like what the hell was going on. Think of it just like that. Like, if anybody who did manage to like pull through the first few chapters of Priory of the Orange Tree, you would be able to do the same thing for God of the Woods. I'd even argue and say that God of the Woods is an even easier read because the timelines, while they're not pretty linear, they do jump from one timeline to another. Everything was just fell into place. You just need to put your mind to it. Of course, there's no book that's gonna be damn perfect, right? But this still ended up being a 5-star read for me. I've seen also people like arguing that it had a very anticlimactic ending. But I'm part of the group that really loved how it ended for all of the characters. And these are very amazing and endearing characters. I just couldn't help but root for all of them. That being said, I really do want to thank like Liz Moore for this book because it really took me out of a reading slump. I've been like falling back on my reading and not enjoying books like I used to late last year, but like God of the Woods really just sucked me back into the book community. And I feel like her characters, Barbara, Louise, Tracy, TJ, and Juditha, not so sure if I'm pronouncing her name right. I know they're all like fictional characters, but I truly believe that they will stay with me for a very long time. Truly, it is a 5-star read. Go check it out. Now, after reading God of the Woods, there was this other book that floated into my radar, and that was All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. Like God of the Woods, this was also set in the 1970s, specifically some fictional town in Ozark County, Missouri. And like God of the Woods, it also happens to be a mystery. Now, we get a huge cast of characters, but the book is primarily told in the POV of the two best friends, Patch and Saint. At a very young age, their lives are upturned when Patch saves this girl, like this rich girl named Misty, who he has harbored like this secret crush on, from a would-be kidnapper. He's then taken hostage, and his only solace for like the many months he's held captive is this mysterious young girl named Grace. Now, Saint is relentless in her search for her best friend, and spoiler alert, she does play a very huge part in rescuing him from that kidnapper. We then followed the two through the decades after the kidnapping, and it's a pretty dark and gritty story. I mean, reading the book, I kind of had like in my mind, like I had that setting, like that it was like permanently filtered with a moody and dark filter, like the Ozark show with Jason Bateman. So if you're from the Ozarks, I'm very sorry. I've never been. I'm pretty sure it's a beautiful place and does not have a permanently dark filter over it. Anyway, the themes of God of the Woods and All the Colors of the Dark are pretty similar too, as they talk about corruption and trauma and social class, as well as lighter themes such as love, loyalty, and friendship. But honestly, I couldn't really love this book as much as I did with God of the Woods. In a nutshell, I do appreciate that this was sort of like a passion project, and I know that Chris Whittaker really did put a lot of effort into writing it. This book has a very big rating online, and a lot of praise goes into like its characters and the overall storyline. However, I do have a bit of an outlier opinion because I just couldn't bring myself to love the book. Problem number 2 would be Patch. I know his relationship with the ever mysterious Grace was what really drove his character arc, but it was kind of borderline obsession, and it truly gave him like no redeeming qualities at all. I understand that a traumatic event can truly change a person, especially when they don't get any therapy or any support after that. But Saint was there to truly love him and help him through his issues. But Patch chose really not to listen, and as a result, he had no character growth beyond the fact that he was obsessed with Grace. The fact that the author also framed his relationship with Grace, a girl he met on his kidnapper's basement, as true love is just ridiculous, and we should call it what it was. An obsession. He even goes on to have like this relationship with a girl named Misty. I mean, I did mention her a while ago. She was the rich girl that he saved, and he ended up like leading her on for so many years. I really hated Misty's plotline. I think she's like a character who should have never been introduced in the first place, because her story arc was a waste of time, because she never really existed beyond being Patch's other woman and being the woman in between Saint and Patch. I hated her, and I know I shouldn't hate a fictional character. I hated her, and it makes me so mad to think about her every now and then, and I don't think I will be rereading this book because I didn't really like how she was written. And speaking of Patch's relationship, that also includes the one that he has with Saint. Yes, this book reads like a harem. It's like a love square, and it's with great displeasure to announce that the great female character like Saint, who has the potential to be a role model for so many girls, ends up being so in love with a man who is so emotionally unavailable and so dismissive of her. Her entire character arc, like Missy, was just to support Patch. Saint alone, as evidenced by the first quarter of the book, she's really an amazing character, and I enjoyed reading her POV better than I did with Patch. But when it came to the middle to last part of the book, there was a lot of emphasis of their relationship, and it was just, I'm sorry for the word, it was just very downright abusive, because she hardly held him accountable for anything, and clearly he just took advantage of that. Like, what was the message there? Problem number 3 would have to be the big reveal. As I said, the rest of the book is about Patch obsessing over a girl named Grace, while 2 other girls pine over him. And then we get this reveal about Grace, who Grace is, and I don't know, man. I'm just so disappointed that she turned out to be, spoiler alert, real. I kind of wanted, I know, I'm not in charge of the story, this is all Chris Whittaker's idea, as it should be, but I think I would have rather that it would be revealed that she was just a figment of Patch's imagination, and then we'd get a scene of her stepping out of the shadows, and at the end of the day it would be Saint, and in his mind he's basically where I'm getting is that it's Saint all along that's been giving him his strength while he was in the basement, kidnapped and held captive. I would have loved that. Instead, we got a very anticlimactic reveal. For a story that revolved around Patch and Saint, the book felt very one-sided and convenient for one character, Patch. Okay, sorry if I got too heated back there, but if you are wondering at this point, like, why I even bothered to finish the book, well, it's because I really wanted to know who Grace was, and I didn't want to spoil myself because I had already gotten very far in the book. I had already spent so much time that I should have been doing something else. Yeah, it does get like 2 out of 5 stars for me because I liked the first quarter of the story. I felt like the mystery was intriguing and the way the author wrote the short and snappy chapters. But overall, I do feel like it was a tedious read. There were a lot of plot holes and too many conveniences for Patch. The amount of times I wanted to do something else instead of reading this book was crazy. And I know that's on me, but at the end of the day, I read the book and I finished it. I'm giving it 2 out of 5 stars, and I wouldn't be recommending this to anyone. Sorry. Now let's talk about the book that was a highly anticipated read for me. I am a big fan of Black Mirror and I'm so excited for it to come back this year. I also happen to be a big fan of Her, you know, that movie with an AI version of Scarlett Johansson. And because the blurb of Annie Bot was exactly that, I really did like the theme, and I was also on the hunt for a good sci-fi that wasn't a space opera or something. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of thinking that Annie Bot would be a sci-fi before reading it. I mean, it's marketed as such. And sure, you can chalk that up as being a me problem, but let me further explain why I wouldn't be recommending this book. If you're looking for a book that talks about the disadvantages and dark side of technology and AI in general, this isn't it. If you're looking for a book about a robot, aka a sex robot, discovering humanity after deciding she wants to break free from the constraints of her asshole owner, this isn't it either. Nothing happens in this book. Nothing happens. Annie Bot is an extremely difficult to finish book. And mind you, this is a very short book and a quick read. Yet, there comes a point in the book that you really come to realize that this isn't a sci-fi, this isn't a romance, this isn't like a feminist book. It reads like some, and I mean like this with all respect to the writer, it reads as some weird 4chan or Reddit confessional about kinks. And honestly, I don't want to kink shame, because if you want to make love to a robot, that's totally fine, as long as you don't end up like harming anyone, right? The point is, you don't market the book as an AI bot, a female sex bot, starting to gain sentience and wanting to become a real woman, when that isn't what's central to the story at all. Annie, for the whole duration of the book, is just serving Doug. She runs away at some point, but then she comes back, at not her own will, by the way, but then she comes back and nothing really happens. She doesn't really learn anything. She gets so depressed because Doug, her owner, gets so disappointed in her, and she doesn't have any character growth beyond that. What is it with character growth? That's a big pet peeve of mine, the lack of character growth, even if you're an AI bot. And not to mention, after her first and only act of rebellion, we have again to endure, and there's a lot of this in this book, all these instances or scenes of her adjusting her temperature to please her owner Doug. In the end, she does manage to go free, but she calmly walks away after all the emotional abuse she endures throughout the book. No one ever is taught a lesson in this book. You'd think that after all the uncomfortable writing and the uncomfortable scenes I had to read through, I'd at least deserve some sort of robot-like uprising, Terminator style, or Annie smacking Doug in the face. Anything! She was a sentient AI, for God's sake. Now, this is such a good concept for a book, especially with AI stuff taking over, but it had such a poor outcome, and I was so disappointed by the end of the book. There was also very little effort to build on the setting. Like, we get the technicality of Annie and other cuddle bots, as what the sex bots are called, but we don't really know what's happening in the world around them. Like, if I'm not mistaken, like, the book is set in New York City, and that's really all there is to it. Like, most of the time we're just following Annie around her apartment that she shares with Doug, or like Doug's apartment, basically. But what year was this? Like, what more can we learn about Annie's manufacturers, and why did the author choose to leave them out of the plot for the rest of the story? I don't really get that. If we could have so many scenes being written like about Annie's and Doug's intimate life. Unfortunately, I really did not like this book, and at the end of the day, I did give it a 1-star rating. If you're looking for a good sci-fi, if you're looking for a book that really captures the whole feel of Black Mirror, the bleakness of it all, this isn't it. This is a very strange book, almost like a character study, but you don't really learn anything or feel anything at the very end because it had such a boring ending. Now, the last book I want to talk about, because we're losing light, is We Used to Live Here, a debut horror novel by Marcus Klewer. Now, here's a fun fact. This book is actually rooted in Reddit, and you will be surprised by how many really good, creepy short stories that you can check out on Reddit. And this is definitely one of the better ones and really deserved its publication. However, I did end up having mixed feelings about the book when I finished it. Let me explain. Now, imagine you buy a house of your dreams at a crazy good price, and it turns out to be your worst nightmare. Our protagonist Eve is a people pleaser by heart, and that's super relatable. She house flips this gorgeous home with her partner Charlie, and then this family just shows up, and then they choose not to leave. Not to mention, weird things start to immediately happen while the family is around. Their youngest daughter goes missing after this diabolical game of like hide and seek. Eve's partner, Charlie, like in the middle of the book, disappears. Something very strange is in the attic, and I tell you, like, something is really horrible. Like, the scenes there are just nightmare-inducing. Probably the most nightmarish of them all is that the family never ever leaves, and they don't seem to take the hint that they've overstayed their welcome, no matter how Charlie and Eve try to push them away. This book truly shook me to the core, and it was creepy, atmospheric, and it really kept me entertained. It was quite a short read, and once you pick it up, you can't really put it down because you just want to get to the end and see what the fuzz is all about, or what the whole haunting is all about. Scratch that. Like, among the scary and thrilling scenes that we have to read through, we get answers, but like only 40% of that. And to be honest, I don't really mind like leaving things up to oblivion most of the time. I mean, I did really love Our Wives Under the Sea, and that book didn't really have an answer for everything, but We Used to Live Here, if like Our Wives Under the Sea left a few plot holes, this one gave a very like big, large sinkhole at the very end. And again, spoiler alert, if you forwarded the video, I'm giving out spoilers. If you didn't check out the title, I'm giving out spoilers in this video. So some of the questions that I do have is like, who was Thomas's family? Thomas was the guy who like went inside the house and brought his whole family and never left. So if you read the book, it is mentioned that he is some sort of like evil spirit or evil entity that wants to take over whoever like lives in that house. But this time, like, he has like this whole family with him. So was the whole family a bunch of ghosts as well? Or were they real people? Where did they come from? Were they a whole ghost family? And there was like so many symbolism and like anomalies that happened in the house that just didn't make any sense and had zero explanations in the end. At one point, Eve goes to her neighbor's house for help, and that's never really revisited. And I say that because there was so much emphasis on like how creepy the neighbor is and how strange she reacted around Eve. And speaking of things that like never have any answers, one very big plot hole was that the thing with the cabin. Like, Eve, she discovers this cabin and this man turns her around. She meets this guy and he's never mentioned again. And in one scene, like when everything's like, when shit starts to hit the fan, like some anomaly in the highway chases her. And while that scene was really terrifying, like I was like goosebumps all over. I don't understand. What was the point of all that? Like, it didn't make any sense in the end. Overall, I was really disappointed by how the book turned out because it had so much potential, but it was really such a letdown because there were way too many plot holes. What frustrated me was that, like Annie Bought, this had the potential to be really good. I gave it like 2.5 stars on Goodreads, so I'm like really on the fence if I like this book or not. But as you can tell by my face, I probably wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for a good horror. But if you're looking for a book like Goosebumps, which is just horror fun, I think maybe you would enjoy this. But if you get bothered by plot holes and want an explanation for things, you will be distracted by this book. Okay, so that wraps up my video. I am actually in the middle of finishing The Secret History by Donna Tartt, and I really enjoyed this book for some reason. Like, I'm actually almost done. I really do enjoy this despite it being a book filled with awful, selfish, psychopathic young adults. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Let me know what you're reading right now, and if you have recommendations for me or any thoughts about the books I just mentioned earlier. I'd love to hear it. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!